Hello, watching L24 Midnight News coming to you live from Algiers, and to the headlines. The chairman of African Union Commission, Moussa Faki, called on the Malian authorities to advance the peace and reconciliation agreement stemming from Algiers process. Algeria has been reinforced by a new energy facility with a capacity to process 60,000 barrels of oil and 2 million cubic meters of gas per day. The Jordanian embassy in Washington has announced that US President Joe Biden will host King Abdullah II at the White House on Thursday. The biggest day of industrial action Britain has seen in more than a decade resulted in the closure of thousands of schools and the disruption of train services. Hello again and welcome. I'm your host, Abdurrahim Kashur, and those were today's top stories. First, the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, received on Wednesday the credentials of the new ambassadors of Venezuela, Azerbaijan, and Chile to Algeria. The credentials ceremony took place in the presence of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Mr. Ramtan Amamra, and the Director of Cabinet at the Presidency of the Republic, Mr. Abdelaziz Khalaf.
Monsieur le Président, j'ai le grand honneur de vous remettre les lettres de créance pour lesquelles mon président, son Excellence Nicolás Maduro,
نقلت لفهمته.
I conveyed to His Excellency the greetings of the President of Azerbaijan, Mr. Ilham Aliyev, and his best wishes to the Algerian President, state and people of wellness, prosperity, peace and security. Both countries have a good opportunity to develop political, economic, cultural, commercial and interparliamentary relations, in addition to relations between the Algerian and Azerbaijani peoples.
We will endeavor to develop relations between the two countries in many fields, including trade and energy, in addition to other fields. We will also work in line with a roadmap of non-aligned countries, including Latin American countries, the Caribbean and African countries. The most important thing is to develop our countries and involve Latin American and African countries in the fight against terrorism and promote our peoples.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Mr. Ramtan Amamra, had a phone conversation with U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman at the latter's initiative. The call allowed for an exchange of views on several issues of common interest at regional and international levels, including the situation in Mali and the Sahara region in particular. Still in Africa, the chairman of the African Union Commission, Moussa Faki, called on the Malian authorities to deploy efforts to advance the peace and reconciliation agreement stemming from the Algiers process in consensual manner. Mohamed Khatou.
Faki Mahamat renewed during an official visit that led him to Bamako the Union's desire to support coordination and efforts between the United Nations and ECOWAS Group to provide the appropriate environment to ensure Mali's stability and ensure a consensual and smooth transition of power. While expressing his satisfaction with the tangible steps taken by the Malian authorities, Faki Mahamat called for implementing the agreement, considered by most of the parties to the Malian crisis the most appropriate solution to preserve their territorial integrity.
I call for intensifying efforts to implement the peace and reconciliation agreement stemming from the Algiers process in a consensual manner and mobilizing the technical and financial means to support the electoral process and deepening the political process around core issues for the Malian people and the political and social forces.
The chairperson of the African Union Commission, who is visiting Mali for the third time officially, renewed the Union's desire to support coordination between the bodies at all levels in order to ensure the security and stability of the country.
I renew the African Union's desire to support coordination and efforts between the United Nations and ECOWAS Group to provide the appropriate environment to ensure Mali's stability and ensure consensual and smooth transition of power.
What Algeria aspires to as part of its approach in the Sahel region has been evidenced by its quest to build bridges of support for Mali and other countries to preserve its unity and sovereignty far from any foreign interference.
A quartet regional security summit hosted by Somalia stressed Wednesday the need to unite efforts and conduct coordinated and joint military operations to combat extremism in the Horn of Africa. In the conclusion of the work of the summit, which witnessed the participation of Kenya, Djibouti, and Ethiopia, the four leaders issued a statement, the most prominent of which include affirming respect for Somali sovereignty and praising its clear commitment to getting rid of terrorist Al-Shabaab movement. The Chief of Staff of People's National Army General Saeed Chengriha received Wednesday in Algiers the co-chairman of Algerian Emirati Joint Commission in charge of military cooperation and Deputy Under-Secretary for Support and Defense Industries at the Emirati Ministry of Defense, General Major Mubarak Saeed Ghafan Al-Jabiri. The meeting was held on the sidelines of the proceedings of the 11th session of the Algerian Emirati Joint Commission in charge of military cooperation. The Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Ammar Bellani, received today in Algiers the Venezuela Vice Minister in charge of Africa, Yuri Alexander Pimentel Mora, as part of the second meeting of the political consultation mechanism between Algeria and Venezuela. Both parties examined ways and means likely to promote bilateral cooperation.
Attending the second session of the political consultations between the two sister countries, namely Algeria and Venezuela, was an opportunity for me. I have examined with the Secretary General questions relating to political, economic and trade cooperation between the two countries as part of the implementation of what was agreed on during the official work visit paid by Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro to Algeria.
Still in Algeria, the Algerian Airlines company has announced Wednesday the resumption of flights between capital Algiers and the Chinese capital, Beijing. The resumption of flights will begin on February 19. Air Algerie will guarantee 2 regular flights per week to and from Beijing every Thursday and Sunday. Flights between Algiers and Beijing were suspended in March 2020 due to COVID-19 restrictions. In the same context, the Algerian ambassador to Moscow has announced that Algeria will increase the numbers of direct flights to Russia to 4 flights per week. Algeria has been reinforced by a new energy facility with entry into operation of the separation and compression complex Hassi Ktara, with a capacity to process 60,000 barrels of oil and 2 million cubic meters of gas per day. Marwa Blair.
In a move to boost Algeria's oil and gas production, giant group Sonatrach is laying a new building block in one of the largest oil fields in Africa. The Separation and Compression Center of Hassi Ktara, a strategic project that started its full operation at the end of December 2022.
مشروع معالجة النفط والغاز.
The oil and gas processing project that is produced by 3 or 4 fields located in the southern side of Hassi Msaoud, Hassi Tarfa, Hassi Zabat and Hassi Ktara.
الناحية الجنوبية لحاسي مسعود. حاسي طرفة، حاسي زباط وحاسي قطارة لإنتاج حوالي 60,000
to produce about 60,000 barrels per day and about more than 2 million of natural gas that is pumped in the direction of Hassi Msaoud.
مليونين من الغاز الطبيعي الذي يتم ضخه لناحية حاسي مسعود.
This strategic complex is equipped with wastewater treatment technology, as it will be extracted and then re-injected into wells.
معالجة المياه المسترجعة عن طريق الإنتاج.
The recovered water is treated by producing these wells in this area, as well as injecting it into the wells. This facility is large. Its work began at the end of the year 2022. We are in the process of completing the last production experiments.
الأخيرة للإنتاج.
The project, which cost more than $1 billion, also enables recovering all flared gas and exploiting it in transportation networks in order for it to be promoted locally and internationally.
هذا المشروع كلف تقريبا أكثر من مليار دولار.
This project costs almost more than $1 billion.
بطبيعة الحال أهميته أهمية استراتيجية.
Of course, it has strategic importance through which we will work to raise Sonatrach's production. 60,000 barrels per day is a significant amount.
The new investment has dual objectives. First, to maximize Algerian hydrocarbons production, and the most important is to dedicate Sonatrach's efforts to go towards green energy facilities and achieve carbon neutrality goals.
Still in Africa, Tunisian President Kais Saied called on the leaders of the National Guard to confront those he called conspirators against the state. This call came during his meeting with the senior leaders of National Guard of Al Awina barracks in Tunis, according to a video recording broadcasted on the presidency Facebook page. The Tunisian president stated that the need not to leave those he described as enemies of the state and enemies of the nation outside accountability.
عليكم وعلى القضاة الشرفاء.
You and the honorable judges must play your role fully, so that those who plotted against the state in the past years and are still plotting against the state up to this hour are confronted. The people want to purify the country. The people want accountability because they are already tired of the lengthy procedures and are already tired of the cases, which remained published for more than a decade without any judgment. And even if some judgments were issued, they were unfortunately issued according to the size.
Iranian Foreign Minister Hussein Amir Abdullahian met with the Mauritanian president during his official visit. In the meeting, the two sides discussed the development of bilateral relations in various fields, especially technology, culture and economy, but also regional and international developments. Amir Abdullahian appreciated the efforts by Mauritanian president to establish peace and security and fighting terrorism in the Sahara region. The Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Antonio Tajani, announced his country's intention to hand over 5 ships to the Libyan Coast Guard in the face of illegal immigration. Tajani described his country's decision to send ships to Libya with funding from the European Union as the accurate option to address migration issue within the framework of what he called investment against climate change, terrorism, poverty and disease, stressing the need for a new European strategy in this direction. The permanent representative of Palestine to UN, Riyad al-Mansour, renewed call to international community for immediate intervention to stop the Zionist escalation and provide international protection for Palestinian people. This came in 3 identical letters sent by Mansour to the Secretary General of the United Nations, the President of the Security Council for the current month, and the President of the General Assembly of the United Nations. Mansour indicated that since the beginning of this year, 35 Palestinians, including 8 children and a woman, were killed, in addition to the injury of hundreds. The Jordanian embassy in Washington has announced that the U.S. President Joe Biden will host Jordan's King Abdullah II at White House on Thursday. The King of Jordan is already in the United States, where he met with the U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Kevin McCarthy at the Capitol early on Tuesday. The meeting comes amid particular heightened tensions in the Middle East. Lebanon has devalued its currency by 90% as it seeks to address a deep economic crisis. It is a move that still leaves the pound far above its parallel black market rate. Marim Zian.
3 years into a crippling financial crisis, Lebanon has devalued its official exchange rate by 90%, far below the commonly used rate on the parallel market. The measure is meant to stabilize the free-falling Lebanese pound and eliminate the multiple exchange rates that currently exist, but also to meet the demands set out in a draft deal with the IMF to unlock a $3 billion loan facility. The new rate is 15,000 pounds to the dollar, while it is 60,000 per dollar on the parallel market. However, the new rate raises fear it will lead to another surge in inflation and high prices of food and other essential goods.
We need something that actually reflects the market value, and the only way we can do it is by building a centralized currency market in which people can openly and transparently trade Lebanese pounds and dollars.
Described as the world's worst economic crisis of the past 150 years by the World Bank, the crisis has left the majority of people locked out of their deposits and more than 3/4 of the population in poverty.
I used to use this 16,000 Lebanese lira to buy a kilo of meat for me and my kids. Now, they don't get me chewing gum. The 250 grams of meat cost 100,000 Lebanese lira. Fear God. Our kids are hungry. We're hungry. Drop the dollar. We want to live. Have mercy on us.
With the continuous collapse of the local currency, all factors led to the adoption of the new measure set for the first time in 25 years and which reflects an unprecedented economic collapse.
Russian government considered that possible delivery of long-range missiles to Ukraine by the United States will not change the war and the current situation in Ukraine and assured that Russia will continue its offensive at all costs. Hussein Barkan.
Kremlin said Wednesday that longer-range rockets reportedly included in an upcoming package of military aid from the United States to Ukraine would escalate the conflict, but not change its course. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov also told reporters that there are no plans for Russian President Vladimir Putin to hold talks with US President Joe Biden.
There are many nuances at the present time. We see that the whole NATO military infrastructure is working against the Russian Federation. We see that the whole NATO reconnaissance infrastructure, including reconnaissance aviation, satellite groups, are working 24/7 in Ukraine. The Ukraine regime's interests. Of course, all of that creates very special conditions, hostile conditions for us that we can't help but take into account.
One of Russia's top spies forecast that the NATO military alliance would fail to inflict a strategic defeat on Moscow, despite sending billions of dollars worth of weapons and military hardware to Ukraine.
NATO is raising the stakes as they retain dreams of the so-called strategic defeat for Russia. But this is not going to happen. At the same time, of course, we note an increase in both the volume and range of military equipment supplied to the puppet Kiev regime, including offensive weaponry. The logic of this is that the United States and their allies are committed to wage a war against Russia till the last Ukrainian.
Ukraine is keen to secure more Western military aid to fend up the much larger Russian forces. It has already won pledges of tanks and now wants more. The $2.2 billion military aid package is expected to include long-range rockets for the first time. Such rockets would allow Ukraine to attack all Russian-controlled territory and thus meet its goal of retaking all of its territory by force, including annexed Crimea.
Thousands of schools in the UK closed. Train services were paralyzed and delays were expected at airports Wednesday in what was shaping up to be the biggest day of industrial action Britain has seen in more than a decade. Nabil Khazini.
They were up to 500,000 to take part in the biggest strike to hit the UK in more than a decade. The industrial action involves teachers, civil servants, border force staff and train drivers. However, this is not the end of the story. The full scale of the disruption will not be known until the start of the school day.
teachers are striking in England and Wales today because there has been, over the last 12 years, a really catastrophic long-term decline in their pay. Teachers have lost 13% over that period. That's, in real terms, a huge amount to lose.
Unions are stepping up pressure on the Conservative Party to demand better pay. The surge in the cost of living is biting a lot from the pockets of workers in the UK, like many others in different sectors. Teachers are also demanding increase on account of the soaring double-digit inflation rate in the United Kingdom.
Change your priorities. People who work in education, in care, in health, they are building the roots for tomorrow. And if we don't care now, we will have lots of problems. We already have, but it's going to just grow. So now or never.
When asked what Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is doing to sort out the industrial action, the Prime Minister answered that teachers were given the highest pay rise in 3 decades.
I am clear that our children's education is precious and they deserve to be in school today being taught. And actually the party opposite would do well to say that the strikes are wrong and we should be backing our school children.
This is just the beginning of such industrial action. More, including by nurses and ambulance workers, is planned for the coming days and weeks.
The Algerian national coach Majid Bouguerra was able to achieve an unprecedented achievement by leading the local team to the final of the Chan tournament for the first time and gain the Algerians' trust, confidence and respect thanks to his training capabilities and leadership personality. More.
The Algerian coach Majid Bouguerra continues to make history with the national team, reaching the finals of the African Championship for local players for the first time in Algerian football history, confirming his abilities as a coach who will have significant impact on the Arab and African football arenas. With a tactical system and modern football ideas, Bouguerra, who is well known as El Magic in Scotland, back in the days when he was a Glasgow Rangers player, he was able to bring out the best of his players.
Whether he was a player in the past or a coach, he's doing a great job with the national team, and a great future awaits him with his country and the Algerian Football Federation.
In light of the talk about Bouguerra being qualified to lead the first team, the response came from the former national team defender, saying that he is not yet ready for a similar task, expressing his respect for the current manager, Jamal Belmadi, who he considers an older brother and who had great credit for him at the beginning of his coaching career.
I have great respect for Coach Jamal Belmadi, and I will never forget what he gave me throughout my career. He is the one who gave me the desire to become a coach. I learned a lot from him. He is like my older brother. I am here thanks to him and the FAF officials. He is an experienced coach and I hope he will qualify us for the next World Cup.
Meanwhile, Bouguerra and his Cups will be on date with glory this Saturday, looking to write a new chapter in the history of Algerian football by securing golden medals for the first time in the Chan tournament.
Godwin, our national football team will gain this tournament. To this end, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. For more updates, you can follow our social media platform. And for now, good night.